Welcome to Norway Perspectives, brought to you by Norway Relocation Group. In today's episode, we're talking about a part of life in Norway that almost every newcomer experiences: renting a place to live. But we're not just talking about finding a flat. We're talking about what happens when you don't understand the rental contract and how that leads to stress, financial loss, and in some cases, serious legal problems. If you've just moved to Norway, or even if you've been here for a while, you may assume that signing a lease is a simple process. But Norway's tenancy laws, digital systems, and local practices are unique. And if you don't understand how rental agreements work here, what's legal and what's not, or how to protect yourself when things go wrong, you may end up paying for months after you move out, losing your deposit, signing a contract that can't be broken, getting evicted without understanding your rights, or living in a space that isn't legally rented at all. In this episode, we'll walk through the structure of housing contracts in Norway, common clauses and how they work or backfire. What happens when you misunderstand notice periods, how illegal contracts still circulate, and what to watch for. What landlords can and cannot demand under the law, and how to protect yourself from costly misunderstandings. Let's begin with the contract itself. In theory, renting in Norway should be straightforward because the entire system is governed by a comprehensive law, the Tenancy Act, or husleieloven. This law is designed to balance the rights of both the landlord and the tenant. Because of this, most formal rental agreements are based on a standardized form, often called a husleie contract. You'll see versions from organizations like Forbrukerrådet, the Consumer Council, or Huseieren, the Homeowners Association. This standardization creates a sense of security. The problem arises when you assume that because the form is standard, the terms within it are non-negotiable or always fair. Landlords, especially private individuals renting out a single apartment or a room in their house, frequently modify these forms. They might add their own clauses, remove protections that are legally granted to you, or use outdated templates. The language is almost always formal Norwegian, dense with legal terminology that is difficult to pass even for native speakers, let alone newcomers. When faced with a document like this, often under pressure to secure a home in a competitive market, many people simply sign without fully comprehending what they're agreeing to. You might be agreeing to a fixed-term contract that offers no exit, a notice period far longer than you anticipate, or maintenance responsibilities that legally belong to the landlord. You might sign a clause allowing for rent increases that violate Norwegian law, or penalties for early departure that are unenforceable. The critical mistake is assuming every clause in a signed contract is legally binding. In Norway, the Tenancy Act overrides many contractual terms. Even if you sign a clause that's illegal, it's generally not enforceable. But you have to know that to be able to challenge it. One of the most significant and financially devastating misunderstandings revolves around fixed-term contracts. A fixed-term contract, or tidsbestemt leieavtale, means you agree to rent a property for a specific, set period, most commonly 1 or 3 years. Here is the crucial point that trips up countless newcomers. If that contract does not explicitly include a termination clause, known as an oppsigelsesadgang, you are legally obligated to pay rent for the entire term, whether you live there or not. Let's say you sign a 1-year contract for an apartment in Oslo. 4 months in, your circumstances change. You get a fantastic job offer in Trondheim, or a family emergency requires you to return to your home country. You write to your landlord giving what you believe is a reasonable notice period. The landlord then informs you that you are still responsible for the remaining 8 months of rent, unless you can find a new tenant that the landlord approves of, a process called framleie or subletting. You are on the hook for the full amount. This isn't just a threat, it's the law. The landlord can and often will take the case to small claims court, the forliksrådet. If a judgment is made against you, the debt will be sent to a collections agency or inkasso. This results in a negative credit remark, a betalings and møkking, which will follow you for years and can prevent you from getting a phone plan, another rental contract, or any form of credit in Norway. Always look for the clause that says the contract can be terminated by either party with a specific notice period. If it's not there, you are signing a binding financial commitment for the full term. Even when you do have a contract with a termination clause, typically an open-ended one, understanding the notice period is essential. The standard notice period in Norway is 3 full calendar months. This phrasing is very precise and is another common pitfall. It does not mean 90 days from the day you give notice. It means 3 full calendar months, starting from the first day of the month following your notice. Let's walk through a realistic scenario. It's September 10th. You hand in your written notice. You might logically assume your responsibility ends on December 10th. This is incorrect. Because you gave notice on September 10th, the 3-month period does not begin until the start of the next full month, which is October 1st. Therefore, you are legally required to pay rent for all of October, all of November, and all of December. Your contract officially ends at midnight on December 31st. This misunderstanding can easily cost you an extra month's rent that you didn't budget for, creating significant financial strain right when you're trying to manage the costs of moving. Next, let's discuss the security deposit or depositum. Under Norwegian law, a landlord can request a deposit equivalent to a maximum of 3 months' rent. However, the handling of this money is strictly regulated. The deposit must be held in a special dedicated deposit account, a depositum skonto, at a bank. This account must be in the tenant's name, but it is blocked so that neither the landlord nor the tenant can withdraw the funds without the written consent of the other party or a formal ruling from a court or tribunal. The cost of opening this account is typically shared between the landlord and tenant. The mistake that leaves newcomers incredibly vulnerable is transferring the deposit money directly into the landlord's personal bank account. This is illegal, and it removes all of your protection. If you do this, and a dispute arises when you move out, the landlord already has your money. They can claim damages, deserved or not, and simply refuse to return the funds. Your only recourse is to take them to court, a daunting and expensive prospect. By contrast, with a proper depositum skonto, the money remains locked. If the landlord wants to make a deduction, they must get your signature. If you refuse because you disagree with the claim, the money stays with the bank until the dispute is formally resolved. Always, without exception, insist on a proper joint-controlled deposit account. While Norway is a highly regulated country, illegal or informal rental situations still exist, particularly in high-demand urban areas like Oslo and Bergen. These can be incredibly risky. We're talking about basement apartments, or hybler, that haven't been approved for permanent residence. They might lack adequate windows for light and emergency escape, have no independent ventilation, or be missing legally required fire separation from the rest of the house. Other warning signs include landlords who refuse to provide a written contract, insisting on a verbal gentleman's agreement, or those who demand cash-only rent payments without issuing any receipts. These landlords are often avoiding taxes and regulations. Renting such a unit not only puts you at physical risk from fire or poor living conditions, but also in a legally precarious position. If the municipality discovers the unit is not approved for habitation, you could be forced to move out on very short notice, leaving you scrambling for a new home. In these informal arrangements, you have no legal proof of tenancy, which can make it nearly impossible to get your deposit back and, in some rare cases, could even create issues for your legal residence status if your housing is tied to your visa. The legal complexities multiply in shared living situations. In a collective or shared flat, it is common for only one person to be listed on the main contract as the hovedleitaker or main tenant. Everyone else living in the flat is technically a subtenant with an agreement only with the main tenant, not the landlord. If your name is not on that primary lease, your legal standing is weak. You may have no direct legal relationship with the property owner, and your deposit might not be protected under the law. If the main tenant decides to move out, or worse, gets evicted for violating their lease, you could be forced to leave as well, even if you've paid your rent on time every month. Before moving into a shared flat, always ask, is this a legal sublet? Does the landlord know and approve that I am living here? And whenever possible, ask if you can be added to the main lease or sign a direct agreement with the landlord or property management company. Finally, let's talk about rent increases. A landlord in Norway cannot simply raise your rent whenever they wish or by any amount they choose. The law provides clear rules. Firstly, they must wait at least 12 months from when the contract began or since the last rent increase. Secondly, they must provide you with at least 30 days written notice before the increase takes effect. The most common type of increase is an adjustment in line with the Consumer Price Index, or Konsumprisindexen KPI. This is a modest yearly adjustment to account for inflation, not a massive hike. If your landlord suddenly demands a 10% or 20% increase, you should immediately question its legality and ask for the legal basis. Another type of increase, an adjustment to the gjengsleie or current market rate, is possible, but only after you have been renting the same property for at least 2 years and 6 months, and the landlord must give you 6 months' notice. Many tenants are unaware of these rules and accept illegal rent hikes out of fear or ignorance. So, what happens if a dispute does arise? What if you and your landlord disagree over the return of the deposit, claims of damage, or an illegal rent increase? Fortunately, Norway has an excellent low-cost system for resolving these issues. The Rental Disputes Tribunal, or Husleitvisstutvalget, HTU. This is a neutral, quasi-judicial body designed to be much faster, cheaper, and more accessible than the traditional court system. You don't need a lawyer to file a claim. The fees are minimal, and their decisions are legally binding. The HTU is your single most powerful tool as a tenant when you are in a legitimate disagreement. Yet, it's a resource that most newcomers have never heard of. As a result, many either give in to unfair demands from a landlord or simply walk away from their deposit money because the prospect of a legal fight seems too intimidating. In Norway, a rental contract is a serious legal document. Renting is a common and well-regulated part of life here, and the vast majority of landlords are honest and follow the law. But that doesn't mean the process is simple, especially for someone navigating a new culture and a new legal system. Signing a contract without fully understanding it or being unaware of your fundamental rights under the Tenancy Act can lead to significant financial loss, housing insecurity, and immense stress. If your legal residence in Norway is tied to having a stable address, as it often is for work permits or family reunification, these mistakes can cascade into far more serious long-term consequences. The good news is that this is all manageable. Once you understand how these contracts are structured, what the law says, and what the common red flags are, you can approach the rental market with confidence. You can protect yourself, your finances, and your peace of mind, allowing you to focus on building your new life in Norway. At Norway Relocation Group, we help newcomers review and understand Norwegian rental contracts, avoid common housing traps, and deal with disputes when they arise. And at NLS Norwegian Language School, we teach practical Norwegian that helps you read and understand real-world housing agreements, landlord letters, and commune notices. Visit https://norwayrelocation.no for housing support and legal clarity. Learn the language of housing and contracts at https://norwegian.no. Thanks for watching Norway Perspectives. Subscribe for more episodes that help you avoid hidden traps and build a confident life in Norway.